Hello, one and all, and welcome to another episode of Adventuring Academy, the podcast where we talk about all things tabletop and running these games. My name is Brennan and Mulligan. With me today, our guest, you won't believe it. You know her, you love her. She's all over the tabletop sphere, running awesome games, playing awesome games. She's the chief marketing officer for Dice Envy. She's about to appear in Pirates of Leviathan. The new D20 side quest is Myrtle, or aka Myrtle the Bitch. You can catch her show Pirates of Salt Bay for Saving Throw. You can also catch her on the Lost Mines of Phandelver on D&D's Twitch. She's about to kick off a campaign with Omega Jones, aka Critical Bard, this Sunday called Creature Collectors. Please welcome to the program my friend and yours, Ms. Aabria Iyengar.
Hello. I will never live up to that very cool intro, so I'm just gonna go. That was it for me. I'm done. Whew.
Hey, it's impressive because the person who put that together is impressive. That CV is some cool projects. Aabria, thank you so much for being on the show with us today.
I'm so happy to be here. Yay. Long-time listener, first-time caller.
Aabria, talk to us a little bit about tabletop games and how you first got your start. What was your first gaming experience? What got you hooked on throwing dice and playing characters at the table with friends?
So I want to start off by saying, a shout out to my junior year winter formal date, Sean, who was like, you know what you would love? D&D. And I was like, no, he was like, I love anime and D&D, and that's it. And I was like, no, thank you to both. And then cut to a decade later, and I'm like, oh, those are my favorite things. Sorry about it. So I didn't get into it until I was brought in as the girlfriend to a gaming group that was forming with my now husband. And they were like, just be the cleric in the corner. I don't know if you're going to like this or not. Just give it a shot. And I think 2 sessions in, I was like, oh, I like this way more than all of you ever will, and I'm gonna go play it all the time. This is my identity now. I'm very sorry. And I just disappeared in an Aabria-shaped cloud, and the rest is just sort of history. Oh, man.
Full Wile E. Coyote, your outline in dust.
Just through a wall. I think the weird thing is I treated it this is the first thing in a really long time. I grew up as an athlete. So I was in the nerd closet as a kid. I collected comic books and then was oh, social pressure is a thing. So I'm just going to be a cool jock and ignore all of the other stuff that until I'm an adult and no one can tell me anything. But this was the first thing I tackled in the same way that I tackle sports. So it was just about oh, if you want to be good at this and live in it, just go get reps. So I started with our home group and then went to 2 different gaming stores, over in Santa Monica and Culver City, and would sit in on Adventures League, and then found a couple other friends on Facebook that played and jumped in on that too, and then jumped in on streaming and was yeah, my CV is kind of long because I'm just I just want to keep playing and keep growing, and I don't know, it's just constant, I want to improve, and I love telling stories, and it's not the end goal of reaching the point where you're I'm a pro D&D player, but man, there's just something so satisfying in the practice of it.
Well, it's really, I am not surprised to hear your answer that you brought a love and passion for this, because honestly, I remember being an adult. When I was a kid, I was scared of jocks. And then you get older and you realize honestly, both of those people have something deeply in common, which is an obsession with their interest, right?
Yeah.
So I think there's a natural progression if you can get over that hump of the peer pressure when you're a kid, which for kids growing up these days, I don't think exists as much as it did back when I was in a different time and era. But that desire of oh, once I find my thing, I don't let go. That's beautiful. And that's part of the passion, I think, of being in these spaces is you find this pastime or this hobby that is just so fulfilling. And in terms of the different games that you're running, I remember the first time I was watching you play, I was oh, this person is you can tell her passion for this, both from moments of comedy, moments of heartfelt storytelling. I was I gotta play with this person, which is very real. And we made it happen. I can't wait.
We did it.
We did it. This will probably be coming out as Pirates is already airing, so people may have already seen Myrtle in action, which was so much fun. We were talking a little bit before we went live today, and I wanted to talk a little bit because you and I share backgrounds as comedians, but also I think do love a dramatic turn in storytelling.
Yes.
And we were talking a little bit about like adapting different tones and genres of fiction before the games began. Talk to me a little bit about like your experience trajectory of like what were the tone of the early games you ran, and did you find your storytelling instincts taking you to certain kind of games or stories over others as you began, and did that change over time, and like what are you into these days?
Yeah. So I think my one like blot against me in the D&D space is that I don't necessarily care for Lord of the Rings. Like I've just never resonated with high fantasy. There's a lot of other people that will tell you in aggressive detail about like why that is very obvious. But suffice to say, because I didn't grow up with like all of that sort of coding, getting into DMing, my first real DMing, like other than like little one shots and Adventurers League stuff, was I had a gaggle of 14-year-old boys that I tutored like math for and like test prep for. And we were running Storm King's Thunder. So I started like obviously running Wizards of the Coast modules, and they are all very informed by like a lot of high fantasy sensibilities. And I was like, well, that kind of bores me. So like, let's do something else with this. And then Storm King's Thunder, I think I ran pretty like by the book and was like, oh, I wish I'd, like, it was the first campaign that I ran with the regret of like, I wish I had put my spin on it. And like, yeah, I had fun because like 80% of the work for that was just the grossest depiction of like a finishing blow that you can give to a 14-year-old boy. And that's like, all they want is like that and like a twerk joke. Like that was it. Easy money. We love to see it. But then when I started running like Dragon Heist, I was like, okay, heist is in it. So how do we get this closer to heist movies that I care about? And like going back and watching The Sting and like obviously all the Ocean's movies and like trying to bring modern sensibilities and modern bits of fiction into games is a thing that like I super care about, and like it's the thing I'm kind of actively working towards all the time, like for Salt Bay, and hopefully by the time this comes out I will have executed it in the game. If not, it's a big old spoiler. I'm just gonna say it anyway. I'm into it. I rewatched The Dark Knight recently, and I forgot how much I loved like the Joker's introduction with this sort of like the successful completion of a heist and the henchmen picking each other off. And I want to bring in like this sort of like parallel scene of like all the players at the table playing henchmen, picking each other off. And then whoever's the last one standing is sort of retconned as was always like the main villain and then will be the main villain for the entirety of the campaign and the arc. So like, how do you do cool things like that sort of play with the genre and tone? And because we're living in like a theater of the mind space for the most part, more so now, less so when we can like all be at the same table again and like play with actual like battle mats and minis and stuff. But like, how do you treat theater of the mind as a feature and not a bug? If you can imagine anything, then you can play with like space and time and tone and like how things fall, because like you'll have weeks between sessions to like put it together in narrative order in your brain so you remember it in this like story form.
I love that so much. And I think that what you're speaking to is a sensibility that I definitely share. And I think a lot of people that have picked up the game share as well, which is interesting, because I think there's a key in your talking about like, here's the genesis of this game, but here's the purpose I would like to use it for.
Yeah.
And I've been playing this game for 22 years. And even for me, there was an immediate thing of the genesis of this game is in chainmail and other war games from the 1960s and 70s that are very Warhammer-esque, very, like sort of large scale tactical combat things. And when I picked it up, it was very clear to me, like, no, this is an engine for storytelling. This is something that can let me live in a movie, right? Yep. Which is what I want to do. And you're talking about that theater of the mind thing, and I think it's very interesting because there is the work of a DM is to take these materials and then go, cool, these need an interpreter to get my friends living in the movie of their characters, right? How do I make that happen? And I think especially like when you have that like anachronistic element to it of like, how do I make this more modern, or how do I do a different genre or whatever in this? I think that's really important because like, even with something like Lord of the Rings, even with the friends of mine who really can speak in that vernacular, I think it's something that's very true that like, it's hard to stay in that high Ren fare, like at a certain point, no matter how arch you're trying to be, you're still a person living in 2020, and something is going to get a reaction from you that's going to be like, hey, what the fuck? Like,
exactly.
And if you can't imagine Gandalf saying what the fuck, like you're going to be disappointed in that moment. So why not embrace those certain anachronisms to bring yourself, like, I remember there's a funny thing, even when we were, back when I used to LARP all the time, that you'd see people in these gorgeous costumes and then Adidas. Like the shoes always had to stay the same because you're still running around. You still like,
Oh, that's great.
Yeah.
Oh man. But I do actually really like this idea, like kind of jumping back to that of how do we get people to like on board with like shared theater of the mind. And I think another big thing that I like and I like think about all the time is the fact that you have to like, I guess, no, you have to use these sort of like stereotypical shorthands to like get everyone bought in as quickly as possible. And I think it's a thing that pops up in improv a lot too, when you're like, all right, we have to like establish a scene. I've got to get as much information into my scene partner's head as quickly as possible. So then there's this whole like world of like confronting and thinking about stereotypes and then like the fun of subverting them. And I think that goes along with like the like LARPing, but in Adidas. And I'm watching A Crown of Candy now. And yeah, that idea of like high fantasy with like crazy stakes, but like it's Pop Rocks fighting a chocolate bunny. I know they don't fight, but like, sorry, spoilers. Yeah. But yeah, there's so many things you have to think about as a GM about like just being cognizant of like the sort of shared mythos at the table culturally.
I think that's so true. And again, because people do speak in these shorthands, if like it's your job as a DM to make sure that everybody does have that similar shorthand. When we first did Fantasy High, one of the nice things about it was every single person at the table other than me had gone to high school. So those tropes were very familiar to everybody. And it makes a...
Did you not go to high school?
I did not go to high school, but I've seen it on TV a lot. And so...
It's the same thing. You're good.
It's the same thing. You osmose the basics. But that idea of like a shared shorthand, a shared language, when you are preparing a new game, a new world, a new setting, what have you, for your players, how like explicit do you get in terms of sharing what your vision for things? Because I think that like in world building, this is an example I use a lot. Like world building is way more than just the logistics of like, there are this many magical rune words, and the rune words have like the logistical stuff is fine. But when I think of world building, I think a lot about tone, mood, and genre. Yeah. How explicit with your players are you in terms of setting those expectations at the beginning of a campaign?
Oh man, I think I am actively working on the idea. Like I'm in a campaign that's currently on hiatus called Kolok 1991 over on Hyper. And it's very much like in the vein, it's a horror game. And it's very, just sort of weird and different and Twin Peaksy. And the thing that I've learned so much from Zach as a GM is that like this entire game like hangs on, if we don't hold the tone, none of this plays. And I think that's something that like being sort of a goofier person in general, I never cared about until I realized that like the things you can do when you like choose to hold tone is so impressive. And like to go back kind of more towards your question, I think the things I like to build out the most are like it's the playing the like, if this is true, what are the next 18 things that are true? Like me going back to like my like Anthro 101 class in college, like, well, okay, we found like this one, like if the teacup is shaped this way, what does that say about like the culture of tea here? And like, there was like a long Twitter thread I had a couple months ago where I violently overthought how tea works in Candlekeep in my brain, and like had like all of these like 84 things that were true that my players didn't give a shit about. But it was never about them. Like if they engage with it, that's amazing. If they don't, like that's fine too. It just knowing all of that like deep lore stuff, like the things that like if it pops up, it makes you feel like just like galaxy brain brilliant because like you have an answer for this question. But if nothing else, like it informs the like next three things, and like, oh, they asked about something I guess I didn't really think about because I don't personally care about like the fitness culture of Waterdeep, but like my players apparently do. So if the other things that I did think about were true, how does that like translate? Because like they're all closed ecosystems, and yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, I think that makes total sense. And I think there's a lot of like that thing you said, which is a like building block of like the improv curriculum at UCB of like, if this unusual thing is true, what else is true?
Yeah.
Following that logic is so super helpful. And I think it's also helpful when you have like, you know, if you know that the game you're playing is going to be more comedic, or you know it's going to be based in horror, that helps you improvise through it, because even though we don't think about it, all those genres and tones and moods do have rule sets to them.
Yes.
Like even though I am always reacting in the moment as an improviser, if I know that the story I'm in is a horror story, I will go to different reactions than I will if it's comedy, right?
Exactly.
Which is so fun because sometimes you do want to live in those stories and tell those different kinds of tales. When you are like going into these different stories, are you like, what is the genre or mood that you keep finding yourself coming back to in your storytelling? This is a question I really loved from a podcast I was on recently, that is like, when you're looking at your work, because you've run so many and played in so many games, do you look back on your body of work now and say like, oh, there's like a theme here, like there's something that I like to visit in my stories? Yeah, what is it?
I think the biggest thing I always jump back to is like the action comedy. I think it's because for me, I like it. It may not be my personal favorite genre. It's the thing my parents love the most. And like, I think I always go back to like, if I could, like my parents, they can watch like clips of me and stuff. They're just like, I can't follow the rule set. You're just yelling numbers out loud. It's fine. We love you, baby. We're very supportive. You could have been in the WNBA, but I guess this is fine too. But I always try to think of like what would make them laugh. So I like this mixture of like, because yeah, D&D and like RPGs in general are like very action based, but this idea of like the subversive comedic, like that sort of like not quite bathos, like the undermining of like straight action with comedy is my favorite thing. It's the thing I always go back to, because like it's easy to build like a set piece for a one shot where you're like, okay, I want to get to this one specific moment with this one kind of fight that looks this certain way. But yeah, I just don't think, for me, a situation feels real if you can't like make a joke in it. It's going back to a weird thing I remember from my Spanish teacher in high school, was that like you understand a language when you can start to make jokes in it. And I feel like, yeah, and I feel like that's true in like almost anything. Like once you can play in something that should be like straightforward, like you have a mastery of it.
I love that. And I think too that one thing that is true about actual play is a movie can live in a single tone or mood for its entirety, because at most it's 2 hours, right?
Yeah.
If you have a 400-hour actual play campaign and you are as dedicated to tone as The Dark Knight Rises, after 100 hours of we are the light. Again, we are the light on the wall, I would be tearing my fucking hair out. I would be like, someone crack a joke. We've been living in this world for so long. And I think too that there are some like epic old like sort of classic movies that you do see, like I'm trying to think of like sort of golden age of Hollywood, whatever, like movies that really did have like, we are going to move from romance to comedy to suspense to some noir vibe, back and forth over and over without ever necessarily leaving the genre that we're in. But I think that D&D campaigns just are, that you are going to have a moment where someone says or does something and suddenly it's like, no, I know that this was very serious. What you have proposed as a course of action is the goofiest thing I've ever heard in my life. And if we don't roast you right now, we'll never forgive ourselves.
Yes. I also love doing the like one episode like in the middle. Sometimes you can like kind of remove it from like continuity, but like the blow off a steam episode, like we just wrapped up like the main arc of Salt Bay's like thing where they finally defeated the big bad, and the payoff for that was that they got a Love Boat episode. So like in this sort of like dramatic art, like action narrative, like you're gonna spend your honeymoon on a different pirate ship, but it's gonna be the Love Boat. Just Githyanki Love Boat. That's what we're doing today. Here we go. And like, yeah, having those moments, because like, yeah, like you were saying, APs are this weird mixture of like, it's a 400-hour narrative, but it's also like in these like big episodes. So you can have like a genre like bending episode where you're like, we're gonna do this. It won't last forever, but like enjoy it while it's here. And like, here's our love arc, and like, here's the you're on a pirate ship, but this one's haunted, so I guess we're doing like a horror one, or Pirates of the Caribbean, and it's gonna be stupid again because Aabria can't hold tone. Like, yeah. So it's just so good for that, and yeah.
Oh God, I love that. There's a very fun, like, I'm trying to think how to put it. When you are diving into one of those episodes where it's like, I mean, like I feel like, didn't Buffy have like a musical episode? Yeah. It's like, yeah, let's jump in and do a weird bottle thing. Why not? There's something I want to talk about because you, as the DM for Pirates of Salt Bay, running a lot of games, one thing I've been thinking about a lot recently that is the kind of pressure, especially if we're talking about like the ability to hold tone, is the degree of a dungeon master and the role that's been put on you as you are simultaneously like the physics engine for this world. Like you're determining how hard or fast things go, how dangerous something is or isn't. And you're also determining like what consequences are. Are there any, I've definitely had moments on camera where I make a determination of like, I think this is what the consequence of that would be. But that's all based on me, a fallible human being. And suddenly people go like, you think that's the consequence for what that would be? And you're like, yeah, it's sort of this weird thing where you have to be this ultimate authority for like, this is the fallout from what you did.
Yes.
Do you ever feel pressure as a dungeon master in being this like arbiter of the nature of consequences, be they physical consequences of how actions manifest or like social consequences of like how people would react? And how do you think that as a dungeon master, you need to be like a particularly good observer, as you're saying, of anthropology, of sociology, and like how people and groups react to things?
Yes. Sorry, that whole big question, just yes is the answer. No, first things first, I have done a musical episode in an RPG. Highly recommend. It's wild, but give it a try if you haven't. But yeah, I think I started off with like all of the anxiety around like finally committing to being a full-time sort of like go to the, I wear my DM like badge very proudly now, and it's been that way for about a year and a half. And I think I was so nervous in the beginning about making sure like all of those consequences felt fair. I definitely feel stronger and more comfortable with like social consequences. Like physical consequences, like those feel a little more obvious. Like you do this, like physics and Newton says like this is the reaction. Social consequences, I feel like I worked really hard to like make that make sense and telegraph it up top. So like the table has agreed like in other ways, sort of like implicitly, that like this is the fallout of how this interaction set will go. But I'm also very lazy, and I've now learned that like when you play with a table that you love and trust, you can also offload DM like things to them too. So I like to do the like, okay, someone failed their something check or attack. I'll give them like the beginning of how it didn't work and then ask someone else at the table, like, how's it even worse than that though? And I really enjoy like offering other people at the table, like, how did this go better than the player that originated the action intended? How did it go worse? What's one thing that like the camera sees that no one at the like none of the main characters see, and offloading this sort of like consequences to the group and taking their reading on like what their priorities are and how they care about the game and where they see things going via sort of like this like passive like, well, what do you think? Yes, it's that. And also what I said, we're both right.
I love that. And I feel like too, there's something in what you said that is, I think, a big part of the responsibility of a DM, which is guiding players through failure. Because success is kind of easy. You're just hyping up somebody who already feels good about their great role, and you're just hammering home like, yeah, you really did kick ass. Guiding people through failure is really interesting because for every players are doing two things, right? They want to live in a story, and stories are only meaningful if the heroes of that story experience failure and loss and have something to overcome, right? But on the other hand, there's also a degree of these games which is escapism, and people kind of want to succeed and they don't want to fail. And you talking about like turning it over, like how does this failure work, right? It reminds me of a great piece of advice I got, which is the thing that stings about failure to people isn't pure failure. It's that it creates cognitive dissonance with the competent image of their character in their head.
Yes.
And the great part of that I loved was, it was like, so when you're narrating a failure, just make sure that the failure confirms the character's self-image. So if the barbarian misses on the attack, don't go, you miss, you're weak, you don't connect. Be like, you wildly overextend, recklessly roaring, and the person is able to see that you overly telegraph through your barbaric rage and swing wide and miss. So the person's like, yeah, my dude would fuck up like that. Like,
yeah.
Which I thought was a great piece of advice. How do you like, what do you see your role as being when you're guiding people through failure? And what are your like go-to moves to help soften that blow, if indeed you choose to soften it?
Yeah. Oh man, going along with that, I also love I like wrestling a little bit. I'm like not super well versed in it, but I love a good no sell. So I love a like big barbarian, like raging battle master hit. And then they just like, the bad guy just takes it and doesn't care. Like, you hit, you're great. This is a bigger thing than you expected. And like building up those sort of like, I always think of like the easiest and most obvious job of a DM is that like cutscene of the like, they do something mechanically and then you give it back to them in this like scene. So giving them a cutscene, that like confirms how they understand and moves them through like, you're not going to be successful all the time. I think, a thing I really like to do and try to stress at my tables is that like you are more than the actor and like puppeteer of your character. It's collaborative storytelling. So I am not just the world and you are not just your player. You are also the DM. Like we are building like the thing we are going to try to drive to by the end of this campaign is that we told a story together. And by helping people sort of dissociate from like, I am my one character in this individual moment and will take all of my failures personally and as a sign of like personal incompetence or like weird table vibes, knowing that like if you were sitting down and writing the script of this, you would put that main character through hell because like you know that that's like the forge that burns like and creates like the biggest high at the end. So like don't be afraid of that for your character. But I do think it takes some like coaxing and coaching as the DM to say like, okay, what's about to happen is going to feel really bad on a personal moment. So how do I help lift you out of your brain right now and say like, your character's going to fail. They may die. They may stay dead. So like asking them sort of about like what's happening with the rest of the world, handing them, I literally use the phrase, like I talk about like what the camera sees all the time. I think it's a thing in like LA because, or just in culture in general, because we think of things in the very like film and TV lens, that like using that helps people sort of think about it like a story and not about like a memory. And yeah, it kind of lifts them from it.
I think this actually brings us to our first audience submitted question. Thanks for submitting questions, and gang, you can always do that on our Dropout Discord server, and mods and people should put up the link for that. This first one is from Artemis Prime. Thanks, Artemis Prime. And the question relates to that we're talking about. How can I actively involve my players in world building? I'm running a homebrew Final Fantasy campaign for some friends and want to let them know that they have agency to paint little bits of the world that it's taking place in while not letting them take over completely. Please help. Also, thanks.
Yay!
Yay! Well, thank you, Artemis Prime. Yeah, how do we... So I've done this in the past of giving people domain... it's not that there are hard limits, but almost like expectations. Like, I expect you to be able to improvise this. When, like when we did the Unsleeping City, Lou Wilson and Siobhan Thompson played our like old timers, people that had been heroes of the Unsleeping City for a long time. And I sort of said going into it, like, if I introduce something in the campaign, you guys probably are firsthand familiar with it because you've been around for a long time. Feel free to improvise familiarity with things that I bring up, and feel free to improvise details. And one of them was literally, there's a detail that was improvised by Siobhan Thompson about a magical train line and where it went to, that unbeknownst to her was going to be a later battle set location. And Rick Perry went in and changed the train line on the train to be the number that Siobhan had said in the earlier episode. So I think, like giving domains for people is a great way to help your players world build. When you're, so for like the long running campaigns that you've run, are there moments you can remember of like real player success in contributing to world building, or like contributing to that idea of this detail that someone else offered up in improvisation, I snatched up as the DM and ran with it in like a later plot hook or arc or whatever?
Oh yeah, definitely. I super agree with you. I just want to like confirm and reaffirm that, like, yeah, lean on your players with their expertise. A thing I love doing is asking, like, in the sort of like, before you introduce your players, I'm not a huge fan of like coming up with pages and pages of backstory for your character, because I love the ability to integrate it into the things that are presented like in situ, like as we play. But I love getting that, like, what's one weird, like, what's your character's quirk? Like, if everyone's going to do an impression of your character, what's the thing they latch on to? And then like figuring out a way to bring that and like make it true and justify it. So every now and then you'll have a player that like does like a weird voice and you're like, okay, I guess that's how everyone from here sounds now. And like, or they super don't, and you're wild for that. Like, you're the Madonna in Detroit that has a British accent for no reason. But yeah, I like picking that weird thing that they care about, that like weird hill that they're gonna die on. If you present me a hill as a DM, like, that's real forever, and we're gonna, like Rome, I will build a city on 7 hills, and that will be our game.
I love that. There is almost something threatening as a DM about like, oh no, I'm gonna yes and you. Whatever crazy, whatever you said, I will be on top of that saying yes and to that. There's a great example, Brian Murphy, former guest on Adventuring Academy, and cast member for Dimension 20, DM for Not Another D&D Podcast, is great with this because he gave who gave Emily Axford, who is another Dimension 20 player, and also College Humor, and all the stuff. Murph's and Emily and Murph are husband and wife. They play on that pod together. And Emily made this incredible PC, Moonshine Cybin. I guessed it as her character's brother, Deadeye Cybin, in a small arc on the thing. What a tangled web. But what was so great about Murph and Emily's collaboration is that Emily started as this character from the Crick. She was a Crick elf, which are, like we're saying, not this high fantasy thing. These like down home Southern elves who she had like a possum animal companion, and it was very like, banjo strumming elves. And Emily spent the first chunk of the campaign like improvising all these incredible details about the Crick. And when they went there, Murph, like a steel trap, had taken all of these bits and like now they are true. It's one of the best examples of collaborative PC DM world building.
Yes.
And again, seeing like, of course, a PC needs to have ultimate authority over their like homeland that they're from. And when you get there, it's like the coolest thing in the world for the DM to have yes-anded that.
Right. Oh, that's so cool. I'm obsessed with making everything Southern right now. Like, I love Lovecraft Country, and I want to run Curse of Strahd, but make it like a slow, sultry, like Georgian, like Gothic horror story. And I'm just, make everything Southern, and that's fine for me. So I'm gonna go back and listen to this. This feels like this is relevant to my personal interests. Thank you.
It's great. Well, it's very funny too, because I think it's one of those things where I think sometimes people romanticize a devotion to the canon. And I think that's almost always destructive, because your faves usually didn't do that themselves, right?
Yes.
So it's funny to hold like Tolkien, for example, as the gold standard for fantasy, because specifically what Tolkien set out to do was create a new mythos for like, so if you want to be like the guy, don't do the guy's thing. He went and did the new thing. Go do the new. He was like, there should be a mythology for England, for whatever this sort of like, and mythologized hobbits as these little country squire English people that are pretty identical to how he lived his life. Like a bunch of snacks during the day, smoking pipe weed. Sounds like what that dude was about in his personal life, right? So yeah. Then you look and say, okay, so if you're an American DM living in 2020, why not mythologize the subject of your own real life and create the fantasy version of that, right?
Exactly. It stresses me out when people are like, when they're weird about like iterative creation over like generative, like I have to make this whole thing up whole cloth, and you're like, it's gonna be descended from a lot of ideas that you've had over your life, so like don't be weird and hung up about it. Like, yeah, I agree.
Yeah, exactly. And also, not to get all again like philosophy about it, but like having the idea of like, I am going to create something wholly original from my mind, and you want to be like, oh, your perfect mind that's not influenced. The hubris. Your brain is the world already touched it. The world got its grubby hands on your brain. You can't. There's no getting away from that. No, I love that. But yeah, and I think that's something really, really fun, is to invite those fantastical elements and morph them with your own lived experience, because that's how you get something really personal and really fun with your players. I love this question so much. And I think, too, something that can be really fun as well with world building is, again, inviting like expertise from Lou Wilson runs a great home game that I'm a part of called the Ankyls, which is like a wilderness exploration. We're on like an expedition to the top of this mountain range. It's very fun, wilderness themed campaign. And it's really fun because I'm playing a ranger character in it, and there's a lot of collaborative stuff about like biomes and wilderness stuff, and I happen to be a weirdo about like animal factoids and know a lot of them. So there's a lot of fun collaboration there, where it'll be like there'll be something of like, okay, well, we're in this part of the forest with this thing here, and it'll be like, okay, do we see signs of game around? And it's like, okay, if this is a very lifeless place, the idea that there's going to be big apex predators around here becomes less, because what are they eating? And and it's fun to throw out like PC knowledge like that and have it be reaffirmed by the world. A fun thing.
Heck yeah.
Heck yeah, we love it. let's go ahead and move on to another fun question. So this is a great one too, because this one's from Meg. Thanks, Meg. And obviously, this is an adjustment that not everyone's made. But Meg's question is, what have been the biggest adjustments to DMing remotely? Have any tips for transferring a game that used to be in person to virtually? Thank you, Meg, for the question. That's right. Aabria was in Dimension 20's first attempt at going remote with Pirates of Leviathan. I was very nervous, and I had no reason to be. It was immediately super fun, and it was like we were all at the table together. But Aabria, because a lot of your I know that Salt Base is done remotely and was done remotely even prior to quarantine coming into effect. What are some, do you find that there's a big difference for you between running a game remotely or in person, or not?
I think the biggest one is the problem, and this is a mixture of running it remotely plus socio-political context of being in quarantine, that attention gets scattered very easily. It's now being at a table with a bunch of people like me with ADHD, and it's the holding of focus and attention on a moment becomes so much more important because you don't have the ritual of being at a table and looking down at the same thing, and also having that affirmation and reminder of what are we doing right now? Oh, I see it. There's two minis that are right next to each other, so I bet they're kissing or fighting. It could be either, it could be both. At the same time, I don't know. My games are very weird. But yeah, that idea of holding attention and being really flexible with your players about reminding them in a lot of different ways, instead of just saying just as a reminder, you're in the middle of this scene, this is what it looks like. Finding other ways to sort of refresh table memory is probably the biggest thing when you're dealing with remote games and theater of the mind, is that people's minds wander. So you're gonna have to keep rebuilding the theater and building the set in different ways. So if you described the scenery when they first got there, remind them with what's the smell in the room? Or once again, all the cool things of feature not a bug of playing remotely is if you have it in you, add some visual and audio cues. If you have access to a soundboard, throw in a cool sound effect. I will occasionally, I don't do it as much for my stream games, but in home games I like to because I have a little more time and I'm very bad at technology. I will, as a DM, change my background to the NPC I'm playing to remind people of who I am, because I can't do voices for shit. I'm working on it. See me in 6 months, but I can't do it now. So they'll all just sound like Aabria. But if I have a picture of an angry elf, I'm being that guy that you've talked to 1,000 times.
I love that so much. I also love, that's a perfect attitude. I feel a lot of questions we get from young starting DMs are I don't feel good at this skill. There's a skill I haven't mastered yet. And that attitude of see me in 6 months is the perfect attitude. I hope, please put that on a cushion, a shirt, a mug. That is absolutely the right attitude to move into this space with for everyone who's excited about running games with their friends, because it is an amazing gift. And you do find yourself I've been doing this for a long time, and I keep finding we're getting ready for another Dimension 20 side quest right now, and I'm just be real with you, so nervous because it's a type of story that I've never done before, and I'm oh, this is a challenging genre. And if you're not I think the best thing is to walk hand in hand with, this challenge makes me nervous, and also see me in 6 months.
There you go.
Yeah, exactly. Oh, I love that.
But practice makes it sounds really stupid and really cliche, but you just gotta do it and keep doing it, and understand that even failure is fine. In the same way that we talked about failing forward at a game, you fail forward as a person and you learn. That's the biggest thing that you can add on to a failure. If they miss with a swing, what did they learn about the battlefield as they got distracted from a killing blow, even though they should have had it? Give them something else. And that's true for people too. If I can be super honest, the first hour of Pirates of Leviathan, where I'm sitting next to a table full of people, you're crushing 1,000 NPCs, everyone's got a cool voice, and I'm I just put on a lot of eyeliner. Okay, here we go. I don't do voices, but I'm gonna do my best. I think it's really humanizing to know that everyone, even your faves. And if you've never heard of me before, I'll be your fave eventually. Don't worry about it. But everyone goes through that anxiety, and you just push through it, and you get to the other side of it, and you grow and learn. And maybe you're not where you hope to be, but you're farther than where you started. So just keep going.
Oh, that's so fucking beautiful. You're by this point, you're already everybody's fave. All right.
Oh my God, Nate.
Oh my God. Truly. No, I think that's so true. And it's true. I think every time you sit down with a group of people, you're always trying to do your best. But I think like it's really hard. It's easier said than done. But I'm so grateful for those nerves as well, because there's a certain sadness if you're not feeling those nerves anymore.
Yeah.
Be grateful for the nerves, because it means you care. It means you want to do a good job. And when those nerves go away, that's a bigger problem, I think, because it means you're no longer being challenged by what you're doing. So I think be grateful for those challenges when you move into those spaces. And if you're playing with people you want to impress, which is certainly how I felt sitting down at Pirates of Leviathan as well. It's like, I want these people to think I'm funny and cool. And
I think you're great.
Oh, I think you're great. But yeah, you find that, and I think that's a good place to be, in that middle ground of not being too hard on yourself, but holding yourself to a standard. And I think moving from that place is like the best of both worlds. There's also something you said about too that I wanted to hit on as well. When you're playing, to answer the question of like, you're playing remotely, how do you make that? Is making your games accessible. If you are playing with people where everyone's at their home, they have their devices in front of them, they're looking at the screen that has Facebook and Twitter and Instagram on it, like, it is okay to allow for a little bit of that. And especially because you brought up ADHD, one thing I like to bring up is like, not everyone's cues are going to be the same for what means someone is distracted. I've been playing in a game for 11 years with a dear close friend of mine. If he is on his laptop during the game, that does not mean he's not paying attention. That's something he needs to do to settle himself, soothe his nerves, stim out. And I think that you need to have individual relationships with people based on the way that their beautiful, unique human mind works, to know that not every symbol is universal for this person is checked out or is not paying attention. People have different things that they need to do for themselves to keep their focus going. I have this tiny little piece of plastic pizza that I play with on like 90% of the shows that we do, because it settles me out and makes me have an easier time focusing and staying in the moment. So I think allow for those things at a table, especially remotely, as your table navigates a new setup for the first time. That is a big important thing to do. We got a bunch of great questions. I want to jump into some more of them. This is a great one. This one's from Emily. Thanks, Emily. Emily asks, what kind of things do you usually cover in a session 0? What kind of things do you usually cover in a session 0? Great question. For those that don't know, session 0, that's the pre-session before your first official session of the campaign. Some people use that for character creation or other things. But it's always a good idea to like use that session to get people on the same page. Aabria, what's going on in an Aabria Iyengar session 0?
Yay. Aside from the obvious things, safety tools. Safety. Those are my favorite, and I feel like I shout it from the mountaintop, but like, if nothing else gets accomplished in a session 0 for me and with me, especially if I'm running something at a table, like if it's my session 0, you will understand like all of the things available to you either in a live game or remotely to make sure that like we have a dialogue open. Like communication is 1,000% of having a good time at a table. So knowing that there's a lot of different ways based on like what your emotional state is at any given moment to reach out and make your feelings understood to both me as the DM and sort of the like arbiter of pace and content, and to the rest of the table to make sure everyone's checking in with one another, especially like with games where everyone's bought in on a tone that will be darker and will deal with like more interesting things like the mental side of like I don't know, evil, or like even like romance and like light stuff like that. Like we've got to figure out a way to have all of these conversations. So I always play with X cards. It's really easy. I tend to play all my games off of Zoom chat. So we keep the Zoom chat like open. Zoom or Discord, and then keep the chat open on the side so everyone can have like a constant dialogue. If we're in a heavy scene, I usually am typing. Like, I think there's people that have like reached out to me on Twitter that were like, oh, I think I saw you typing at some point during a heavy scene. And I'm like, yeah, I'm checking with my players. Like, I'll just add like a little O with a question mark to say like, hey, I can't tell if, because you're in Los Angeles, you are going to put this on your reel and you're going for an Oscar, or if you're actually crying right now. So I'm just going to ask, and you can let me know. And they can either respond on screen or in the chat, and then I know if it like needs to have it like the gas let off on it, or if it's a hard stop.
True story. When we were filming Pirates of Leviathan, we were using Skype to record it, and the chats don't get recorded in the screen grab we use for the season, which is heartbreaking because the chat going on during the filming was the funniest stuff I've ever seen. The peanut gallery was on fire for the entire 6-episode run of Pirates of Leviathan. So funny. Love having the chat open. I think that everything you're saying is 100% correct. And I think the reason these safety tools are important to set up at your table is that, and I think when you're setting up your safety tools at a table, one thing I want to emphasize is even with groups of friends, and perhaps even more with groups of friends where there's a lot of trust, because friends can assume like, hey, we're close, like we don't have to XYZ other thing. One of the things is that, like, if you are running, think about 400 hours of improv, something's gonna come up where someone has hurt feelings, even if it's not related to necessarily even like problematic content. It could be someone being like, hey, I feel like I got overlooked in this session, or I feel like X, Y, or Z other thing happened. I feel like this moment got eclipsed, or I feel like, or it can be like, hey, that subject matter made me uncomfortable, but I didn't feel like I could bring it up because it wasn't something I thought to bring up when we had our session 0. I think, I used to say this a lot when I was coaching improv, the ability to fix a mistake or address a mistake is 1,000,000 times more valuable than sinking time and effort into never making a mistake.
Yes.
Like setting up rules for how we have a conversation when the inevitable comes up where someone becomes uncomfortable. It's going to happen. If you're playing for years together, something's going to happen where someone goes like, hey, like, oh, that subject matter raised an issue for me. It was a red flag, something that I didn't really enjoy. That is going to happen. So I think the best thing you can do is be like, hey, when these moments occur, here's a permission for us to talk about it. Here's how we're going to talk about it, I think is the best path forward for a gaming group. Because again, the ability to address a thing, like you were saying in the beginning, communication. It's all about communication. Hell yeah.
I'm not going to take full credit for the chat, but I was very invested in making sure the like Leviathan chat was happening on the side, mostly because like I hadn't played with most of the people at the table, and I wanted to like establish a cadence of dialogue. So if I needed to like say something above game, that I had like we had built the pattern of like, we will talk here, and it'll be mostly like shitty little make 'em ups and like side jokes that we don't want to disrupt the normal game with, but like building a cadence of that was deeply intentional for what it's worth.
I love that. I think that's so important. One thing I love too, a friend who's an indie game designer, Jay Dragon, ran an actual play for my friend M. Grant's game Wickedness. And one of the things that they set up was, hey, these are the safety mechanics for the game. We're going to do an actual play. It's going to be like a 6-hour actual play. We are required to use one of these safety mechanics by the end. In fact, you must. And what I loved about that was it took it from being this thing where in your head as a player, you're like, okay, did that cross my barrier for a safety mechanic or whatever, but being like, we will have failed if we have not used one of the safety mechanics at the end, gave a certain permission of like, oh, we actually like should use one of these throughout the course. Because I think that sometimes safety mechanics people will be like, oh, if I've done something that has triggered a need for one of these, I have committed a grave. And it's like, no, just cause for conversation. Let's talk about it, right? Which I think is like a very healthy way to move forward with those. This next question comes to us from Emma. Thanks, Emma. This is actually about the same topic that we're actually on right now. Have you ever had players use safety measure you instilled beforehand, like the X card, a safe word, etc.? How do you handle that situation while making sure that everyone is safe? Is there anything you recommend to other GMs for ensuring everyone is comfortable and doesn't experience triggers or anything of the sort, or dealing with that scenario? We were just sort of talking about this. Yeah, it has come up. I feel like maybe not in Dimension 20, but in home games, it's come up before. And I think again, it is an opportunity to address a player's need at the table. And again, I would say too, in the phrasing here, it's like, you recommend? Is there anything for ensuring everyone's comfortable, doesn't experience triggers or anything of the sort? Again, I would say that phrasing, it's about how you address it when it does happen, not putting this pressure on yourself of like, I will never hit anyone's trigger.
Yeah.
Also because you don't know what everyone's trigger is. Someone might have a trigger that is not something obvious, and you should create space for them to bring that up in the game, because it might not be something that is like obvious or occurs to you naturally going into it. So it's better to have those systems in place for how to talk about it if and when it does happen.
Absolutely. And I usually play with usually it's like a Google spreadsheet that's lines and veils. For those of you who don't know, lines are things that we all agreed as a group, like will never come up in the game. Things that you just don't want to see, they won't be there. We all know that we're not going to do it. Veils are things that can exist in the world, but you don't necessarily want them on screen. So it's like exit, pursued by bear. The bear eating happens off camera, but we know that bears eat people in this world. So because I leave that as a living document, there have been like more than a couple times where like something new was added to the list as it was coming up. Someone was like, "Oh, ding, that's a line for me today. I don't know why. Spiders are a no-go." So yeah, having those sort of things up and live means that like, yeah, it's not a problem. I think as a DM, you just have to react in the same way. I don't know if you've ever been around like a really young kid that when they trip and fall, they'll like fall and then look at you to see if they should be crying or not, kind of idea. And you just kind of go like, yeah, that's fine. Like, this isn't a big deal. You've expressed like a need and a desire, and I'm responding to it and we're moving forward. It doesn't have to be a big thing. You don't want this, so therefore it's not there. Like X cards are super easy with that because they sort of, at least at my table, they come with the idea that like, it won't be discussed. Like you just said no and we're done with it. So I also play with like color codes, so like red, yellow, and green. So if there's content or like a scene that's particularly intense, I'll have people check in with like the color that they're at. And that usually becomes more of a dialogue if you're like having this like really like dramatic romantic scene and one person slides into yellow because they're having a bad day and they're like, I can't really do this. It can become an opportunity to build dialogue, usually like outside of the term of on camera if we're talking about an actual play, but like you can just talk about it if you're with a home game with friends, and pump the brakes. But having a lot of those things out there means that like when they're used, they're just a part of the game and you don't have to like make it a big thing because it's just part of the like wide world of communication in the game.
Hell yeah, just keeping those channels open and staying communicative.
Yeah.
Yes. Jorge Ochoa asks, how should you handle custom spells and abilities, things players or DMs create for their campaigns? Thanks, Jorge. Aabria, are you like throwing a lot of homebrew into your stuff, or like when it comes to like custom spells and abilities, how much like mechanical spice are you throwing into stuff when you're running it?
I realize now that I guess I don't do this very often. I'm usually always game if a player comes to me with like, can I reskin this to work this way? Yeah, I guess I don't generate a ton of like my own content like that, but I'm super for it. I think it's just a matter of like the way any kind of playtesting works is you kind of give your players their like give them their head, and if it seems unbalanced, have a conversation about like, okay, that destroyed my dragon immediately. Okay, it does half the damage next time. Holy crap.
I agree. There's like adjusting. You can make those rulings as a DM. You can go back in and nerf something a little bit later. You're not bound to it. You can go back and be like bad dad who's like, we're not going to Disneyland anymore. Like be like, I'm taking your toy away. You can do that.
Overwatch patch notes. Patch notes. It cannot do that, or my game is ruined.
It's such a funny thing too. One thing I say is I think people get really worried about home brewing stuff. There's a couple things I would say here. Number one, your stuff does not have to be as balanced as the stuff in the official rule books, because those official rule books are going to be sold to thousands upon thousands of people. So one incrementally unbalanced thing scattered over tens or hundreds of thousands of games is going to, in the long run, be really unbalancing. You can make a decision, because if you're putting it into your homebrew campaign world, if you know that the character who's getting this magical item is themselves underpowered, that magical item can be more overpowered because you're correcting an imbalance in the game that already exists, right? I think that's like something you can have a lot of fun with in those. And I also think too that like if you go read a lot of forums online, I see people all the time being like, this is broken, this is busted, overpowered, it's too powerful.
Yeah.
And I just want to say, like, there are powers that exist within the game of D&D that are really good. And if Wizards had never published Rage or had never published the spell Fireball, and someone released that as homebrew, every person on the internet would crawl out of the woodwork to be like, it's busted. They got to nerf Rage. It's just good. It's just a good power. Things can be good.
Oh, yeah. And I think the most damaging things I've ever had in my games are like dumb goofs that I've given. Like I usually give dumb items to my players. Like I gave the Salt Bays a cake knife that you cut it and it makes the thing cake. And we had to have a conversation on the side. I'm like, you cannot kill my big bad by eating it. Please don't eat him. Okay, it doesn't work on sentient things anymore. Like, leave it to your table.
Love that. Oh. See, that's great. I love it. Bria's like, I'm not sure if I homebrew stuff that much. Oh, I do have a knife that turns stuff into cake. That's a pretty homebrew magic item, I gotta say. Yeah, that is so fun. God, I love a cake knife. But yeah, I think sometimes too, what you have to allow also is I have an 11-year-long home game. We have
holy crap.
We have our. It's a thing. It's so fun. We are now playing remotely again, which means that for the first time in years, we're playing every couple weeks, right? Yeah. When before we were only playing around the holidays when we could get back together. So our archer, these are all 18th level characters in 3.5, so old edition of D&D. It's even crunchier and gets more bizarre and absurd the higher level you get. So I gave this character a magical bow that had no max range on it, because in 3.5, for every range increment, you just get a minus. So I was like, cool, this legendary archer, as she's firing, it's like, okay, there's no max range limit or whatever. But, you know, it doesn't matter, because at a certain point, if she fires at something 8 miles away, it'll be minus 40 to the roll, you know, it'll be something crazy. So it's fine. I then discovered that there is a spell in 3.5 that removes range increment penalties.
Oh no!
Oh no! And I had this moment where she was like, so I'm going to take this spell. She took 1 level of sorcerer to take this spell. And it's like a 1st level archery spell or something like that. And it was like, cool. And I was like, how long does the spell last? And she's like, it lasts 1 round. And I was like, okay. And how many spell slots do you have? And she's like, I have 3. And I was like, so once per day, you can fire 30 arrows anywhere in the world. And we literally had this discussion where I was like, do I nerf this? And I was like, you know what? The wizard can cast Wish 4 times a day. You can fire 30 arrows anywhere you want, because you don't know who's standing there. So you have to be like, okay, like, how's the wind going? Here we go. 10 arrows. These are going to lay. And it's like, we realized, like, even if the person even if the wizard scries on a place, it's like, cool, the arrows still take 3.5 hours to get there. Person has maybe moved by that point out of that square. So you can't. So all we know is that in a certain amount of time, these arrows are going to.
Oh my God. That's amazing. But then you can have this like American Scriper where they're like both are on a ledge, seeing into the future where this arrow will be in 2.5 and just do it. Like, let them build. Like, yeah, I just love this idea of like, if your players are clever enough and motivated enough to build the wildest edge case, like you give it to them. Like, all right, you earned it.
Yeah,
this is wild. You kill the moon, I guess. Sure.
And yeah, exactly. You killed the moon. Why not? You know, like, and that's actually one of the things. The character did shoot the moon in the last session. You have to shoot the moon. You gotta shoot the moon. But it's very funny because I described the scene of like the wizard of the party standing next to the archer and being like, "You want to like? Actually, we could use you if you have an arrow on the moon. We can scry on the arrow and then be familiar with the location and then teleport to that place on the moon." And so it was like taking an arrow out, and the archer lines up the shot, and I described her pointing way far away from where the moon was, and the wizard would be like, "The moon's there," and her having to be like, "It won't be by the time the arrow gets there," and then firing an arrow at escape velocity from orbit.
That's
and you go, it's like, listen, is this like crazy demigod level power? Sure. They've been playing for 11 years. Give it to them.
If not now, then when?
Yes. So much fun. I love it. Here's a fun question from Dan. Thanks, Dan. How do you go about making secondary objectives for your players in combat besides just kill the bad guys? Thanks, Dan. Yeah, I think this is like a great question because it addresses a larger issue too, which is just like combats are also scenes. What do you do to make sure that your combat is also adding to the narrative, right?
Oh.
Aabria, what are your go-tos when you think about like how to go to your, like what do you try to add to your battle so that it's not the classic D&D thing of 2 stacks of hit points just taking turns depleting each other in a room with no other like narrative stuff going on?
Yeah, I think the really lazy answer is that I will usually ask at the top of combat like what people's objectives are, because I'm almost always at a table with someone, or if I'm the player, like I am usually the player that like cares about combat the least. So I'm like, well, what are you trying to get done? Like, what do you care about right now? If you're not here to like punch that giant stack of hit points. And yeah, it's usually like a save, destroy, or infiltrate. So if you are in a location, like what else can you do while you're there? Like, are you investigating every room before you go in? Like, if that's a weird like anxiety that you want to be like prepared for this battle, like what can I give you to like lure? I love luring people away from battle. That's my jam. Like, all right, if you all are going to be fighting my big dragon that I have mapped a lot of personal feelings on, and she also looks like me when she's a human, so I care about her a lot, how do I sucker like half of this party out of like doing something entirely different so this fight isn't balanced? And I think that's usually the moment where I try to give players like what they want for like character arc stuff in the middle of a fight, so they have to like make that usually like character poll choice of like doing what's right for the group or doing what's right for me.
I love that. I think one of the best things to overcome with combat is this idea, because there is this like ritual formal thing in D&D of saying roll for initiative, and in some cases now we're going to break out the minis, and there is this attitude, right, that you're almost playing a different game when combat starts.
Yeah.
And I think that's a good headspace to try to get out of and remember, like, no, these are the same people that have the same quirks, that make the same mistakes, that get emotional, that act reckless. And this fight should ideally matter in the story. Now, am I going to sit here and say that every single home game I've ever played, every single combat has deeply mattered to the story? No. Sometimes ya boy phones it in, but
same.
But in an ideal circumstance, your combat is advancing the story just like scenes or narratives would be. It's a like, you know, there's a combat. one of the opponents is masked halfway through the combat. Someone rips the mask off. Oh my God, it's someone's long lost ex, right?
Yep.
I realized X was standing for a variable, but it could also be someone's. My ex, what are you doing?
We were together for like 2 weeks. Are we exes? Awkward.
Well, I guess fuck me. I already called you my ex out loud, so now I look like a weird, clingy asshole.
I just don't like putting a label on it. Hi-ya!
That's another great instinct, is that ability to add banter and role playing into your combats, so that you are, again, having fun in those moments. Like, I think every DM knows that thing of like, narrate the killing blow, give people a scene based on the mechanics. But I think you can add a lot of those other elements in too. And I think one of the things as well is adding elements that maybe straddle the narrative mechanical divide, but that are not just purely combat abilities. Skill challenges. Are we fighting in a burning building? Is there a risk, is it a game of chicken where it's like, hey, this building is burning, one or the other has to leave at a certain point or we're all gonna die, right? I think there's a lot of fun tools at your disposal to make combat feel narratively meaningful and rewarding. And again, I think too that your character's goals are probably not kill these monsters. They probably have wider goals. So one of the things for you is, okay, if this combat isn't the ultimate, unless it's like Inigo Montoya fighting the six-fingered man, if this combat isn't their ultimate objective, how can I stitch this combat as a meaningful obstacle or a meaningful hurdle in between them and their objective, so it has stakes for them, right? I think that's.
Can I add one more thing on?
Please.
Sorry, I keep making these questions like 4.5 hours long. I regret nothing. One of my favorite action set pieces that I think about, or I try to think about frequently when building encounters in game, is, do you remember the weird like wheel fight in the second Pirates of the Caribbean movie, where they're like fighting on the top of it, but Jack's like inside of it and they're all like fighting over the key to Davy Jones' chest. Like, I love the one weird goal where like fighting is happening, but like someone or the group has like weird stakes. So I did a one shot once where the group's like gardener, they just love flowers. I was like, this entire like massive like ice fight is happening in a meadow where you find this one orchid you care about. Don't let it get smushed. And now like I had like arguably the biggest DPS character who's honestly just using all of their power to like push the fight away from a flower that they couldn't pick because they needed like minutes to like scoop it out. So it was this character playing like a tower defense thing of like a little like flower in the center of the map. And just like having like weird goals that get people bought in. And then like the fact that it's like a weird and kind of funny fight meant that like other characters, when they were getting over like, I don't feel like killing mooks anymore, I'm gonna get in on this like flower game. And then like everyone kind of learns to play like however they want to play in like a weird space.
That's so fun. That is so fun. And like guaranteed every PC who was in that fight remembers the flower fight. Because that's also what it is too, is like, you know, with some exception, a character spends a lot of times using, especially if they're starting at low level, with the same sort of suite of abilities. And after a certain point, you're like, hey, I know what it feels like to get sneak attack on somebody. I've gotten it before. I get it. When you add these complications into your battles, you scratch that itch for someone where they go, oh, I know my character's abilities backward and forward. How do I take this amalgam of feats and features and spells and bend them to the task of protecting a flower, which they were not designed with the ability to do? That's such a gratifying puzzle to give your players. Like, in my head, the second you said that, I was like thinking of like the player characters I've made in the last year and being like, okay, so I'm going to set up a zone of silence around the flower, darkness around the flower. People can't find the flower. I'm setting up now. I had this immediately. It's like, ooh, that's so fun. So fun.
There was a lot of like thunder waves to like knock the fight over. So we were like shifting the whole group. So we actually ended up like putting the fight on sheets of paper. So like the papers would get shifted over on the map. So like it would just happen like half a foot over to the right. It was just very, very fun.
Oh God, like an old Hanna-Barbera cartoon with a fight. It's just like a dust cloud with fists and legs. coming out of it. Oh,
yep.
That's beautiful. That is beautiful. Here's a great question here from Bernie. Thanks, Bernie. What are some common and uncommon character creation faux pas? Rules of etiquette being breached for character creation. So I will weigh in and set the parameters on this question as faux pas being like a breach of etiquette. I don't think there are any. The only faux pas I can think of are decisions that a person would make from a lack of gaming experience that are going to inhibit them having a good time. I don't think that there should be a lot of like external pressures. Like if a person has a dream for a type of character they want to play, they should be able to live that dream. But there are decisions that people make just from not having played before that you can tell like, oh, you are setting yourself up to play a character that you will probably not enjoy when you actually get to the table.
Yeah.
I'm trying to think of like classic examples of this. Yeah, like Aabria, what are some of the do you when you first started playing? First of all, how long were you a player before you jumped into DMing? And then did you have like early characters where you were like looking back, I could have tweaked or altered that to make a more playable experience for myself?
Yeah, it took me about 6 months to go from player to DM, and I was doing like one shots, and I was like, let's go.
I could have called it. I knew it.
Yeah.
You're just like Murph. It's people that are like, cool, fun. So yeah, I'm gonna be running this.
Yep. I got like 3 bad rounds of like one shots, and I was like, hold on, can I just see? Okay, I'll see you next week. I've got this.
Some people are called. Some people are called to the service of the greater good, and they run games. I'm telling you. So yeah.
To answer your question, though, I think the thing I did early on, my very first character was I made a cleric, and I just spec'd into be the best healer I can be, sort of agnostic of like things I would care about. Like I didn't realize I was going to enjoy the social aspect of D&D so much. So I built a character that had like 0 charisma and didn't do any of the things that I wanted to do as a player, which is like talk to NPCs and like lie good, all that kind of stuff. So, yeah.
I think that makes sense of like, making a character that's like too focused on the mechanics first, which let me tell you is not even a beginner mistake. I've made that mistake recently because I get to play so rarely that I get excited about builds, and then I go like, who the hell is this person? Like, who is this person? Which I would actually say is a reason sometimes for, as a DM, you don't want to be pushy, but you can offer gentle guidance as to like, if you know what your story is going to be about, you know that there are going to be certain NPCs, certain plot elements. Don't be stingy with offering that stuff up, because that can help guide a person into making narrative first characters that I think people will usually enjoy more in the long run. And again, I would say one of the biggest ways that people can make characters that they end up not enjoying is, even if you have a build you really like, if you make a character that is not stitched into the fabric of the world at all, that can create a feeling of isolation where you don't feel close to the other characters, you don't have anything in common with them. And I think you can sometimes be like, okay, this is a rootin' tootin' high shenanigans pirate adventure, and I've made like an extremely grim, dark, dour, unfun character. Or even like you can go the opposite direction of a character who has this like big, huge quest and backstory. And then you make a huge backstory, and then the adventure starts, and suddenly you're like, well, this has nothing to do with the gleaming orb that I have with me that I have to return to the Temple of the Four Elements.
Yeah.
You're like, well, maybe you should. So I think finding those, weirdly, I feel like there's a great golden mean. There's like a middle ground where it's like, you have a character that has specifics, they have quirks, they have a personality that will be fun for you to play, but there's also a lot of rough edges. There's unfinished stuff about them, because if your character has no reason to want to adventure, why will they adventure? If your character has too specific of a reason to want to adventure, why would they go on this adventure?
This one, yes! Ugh. God, I couldn't agree more. People that come with like 82 pages of backstory, and I'm like, I'm gonna do my best, but this is more than I wrote for my whole campaign. So, okay.
I think something that people get away from too is there's like bad like I want to say like Hollywood development brain of like people need specific motivations. Let me tell you a little secret of human nature. People usually don't have specific motivations for a lot of the stuff they do.
Truth.
Like imagine if you talk to someone and you're like, so what brought you to LA? And someone's like, my father was killed by a studio executive. And you're like, holy shit, that's a very specific answer. I was expecting like, oh, I don't know, I'm thinking about doing the acting thing. That's great for an adventurer of like, yeah, like I'm an academy trained wizard. I flunked out and now I'm figuring out what's next. That's like a great spot to start in an adventure.
Oh my God, just a bunch of adventurers on their gap year. Love it. They're just gonna find the treasure and themselves. I want that now.
Exactly. Leave yourself open. Let yourself have a found family. Exactly.
I also want to recommend, just as we're transitioning out of this question, to add mechanics like in your session zeros and like as you're all coming together. I think a big way to help keep characters connected and like figure that out is to do something external to build relationships between them. Like I have a deck of cards, it's called Decima, and they have like setting things that you answer as a group and like build the world out together or relationship stuff. So you're answering these questions that like tie you and build connective tissue between you. So even if you don't have like a ton of backstory motivation, at least you're like, yeah, but we like dated one time 3 years ago and I'm just trying to see like, is this still something? And for right now, that's good enough for me. And we'll see about the pirate shit later. Like, and let that be enough. And then you can figure it all out as you go.
Oh, it's so good. Yeah. And those, like, it doesn't take much to provide that kernel. And then it starts to build in game, which is like, that's the best part is when you start forming memories of a character dynamic from within actual play sessions.
Yes.
Becomes so powerful. I feel like we have time for one more question. We'll try to jump in here. This one is from Charlie Foxley. Thanks, Charlie Foxley. Absolutely love the show. You've all inspired me to try creating my own campaign based on one of the worlds of a popular card game, City of Guilds, hint, hint. My question is how much preparation is too much prep when trying to explore a world with such vast canon lore on its own? It's my first time ever doing this, and it's kind of intimidating to say the least. Thank you in advance. Well, thank you for the question, Charlie. Aabria, what's your relationship with prep? How do we feel about prep here?
I love to lie and say like, I don't prep a ton because I just improv it and I'm light and flexible. I prep so much. I think the only, like, for me, before every season of Salt Bae, it's probably like 10 to 12 hours of like, what are we doing? Do I remember what happened before? Like, what are the things that like are tiny plot points that like might come back in later? But I think the only real answer to this is like, do as much prep until you think you're psyching yourself out. If you're doing it out of fear, stop prepping. It'll be fine. If you're doing it because you're like, I love this lore and I will eat it with my cake knife for like 48 hours. I'm not going to tell you and your like fabulous brain that that's too long. Do it as long as you want. Like, just don't let it like freak you out. Like the slavish holding to lore and like being like held to that standard will get in your way more than it helps. Like I make stuff up all the time about things that I knew about a world I built, but I forgot in the moment. So I changed my answer. So don't worry about it.
That's my bad secret too, is that it's like, part of the reason that I rarely, if ever, run modules or published equipment is the idea of being provably wrong about something. It scares the crap out of me. Whereas it's like, just is like having no boss. It's like, I don't have to check in with Jeremy Crawford, nothing. No, like I only check in with me. I didn't like so if come up with some off I think the audience at Dimension 20 would be like pitchforks and torches outside of my house if they knew truly how much stuff I said with confidence in the moment and was truly just out of a hat, like, this is true now. But I think that the key with prep is, and we can be like clear about the types of stuff that DMs need to prepare. In the abstract, it's like, yes, the story, the narrative, but concretely, it's usually what monsters am I going to use in fights, or what rules are going to come up. If it's going to be a big aerial jumping battle, find a good jump calculator online. You can Google them; they're great, right?
Yeah.
Like rules, stat blocks. If they're going to a new place, names of places, names of people, some of the stuff those people are doing, right? And then any like props, maps. Is there like from a dungeon map to like a larger like area map, right? So I think the key here is there is, once again, a golden mean between being underprepared, which I've definitely, we've all been in a session where it's like, ooh, you guys get to a town. Wow, what's the town like? Buildings, boy, structures? Oh, all over.
I definitely done the like, this forest is old as balls. It's full of trees. Big ones.
Yes, big ones. Oh God. Fully. But on the other hand, I will say that like, look, we're all human beings, and for the most part, prep is happening in your free time, especially if you're doing it for your home game, right? Like, it is the lucky individual who gets to prepare worlds during working hours, right? So for the most part, I think that there is a degree of being kind to yourself and over game sessions realizing what is the return on investment. After a few sessions of your game, it's like, okay, I made up all this hidden lore about this like wizards guild, and then I remembered that my party is a cleric, a fighter, and a rogue, and there's no wizard, and no one gave a shit. Nobody even has an intelligence above 10, and they hate the Arcana and they don't like it. Like, you learn what your players' interests are, and I think you can zero in on that stuff, right? I also think this is a move that I pull in home games now when I'm running them, because my players understand that, like, hey, Brennan's like also running a bunch of other games for Dimension 20 while this is going on. I will straight up be like, if they pull a move, because also they're like high level and can teleport. So it's like, hey, we're going to teleport to the bottom of the ocean to this city we read about in one of your lore books. And I'm like, great. I need 15 minutes.
Yes.
Call an audible. Just be like, give me 15 minutes. I got to just like take a second because there's going to be stuff here. I wasn't prepared for it. But if you give me a second, I will be prepared. That's not a bad thing to do. Nobody hates an excuse to walk over to the hummus and chips and like take a breather.
True. And yeah, especially in home games where like there's no performative pressure, like if you need a break for whatever reason, you call that bad boy. And also, along with what Brennan is saying, like it makes perfect sense to like don't think that your prep work stops when your campaign begins. Like you're gonna learn what your characters actually give a shit about like as you play. So like get broad strokes before you start, and then as they hone in on what they care about and what they think the game is, you can like follow that and chase it and throw out. Don't be afraid of like occasionally having to like throw some like railroad tracks out just in front of your play. We all do it. It's a good skill to have. Like, yes, this is always where I wanted you to go. I prepped for it the whole time and you'll never know. So feel free to improvise. Feel free to like call for time when you need it, and like prep for the things that your players care about as they learn to care about it.
I think that's such profoundly useful advice of like, yeah, it is that gif of Wallace and Gromit of the dog putting the railroad track in front of the thing while it's going. And that's the thing is, it's like whether you built it at the table, I think that's the biggest thing to get out of your head about, is that the things you create in one of those spheres have more value or authority. Like whether you made it up at the table or you made it up on Monday, like in your prep time, it's just as valid. Like you and your players are the authors of this world. Wherever you made it up, it still counts. And I have bad news for you. if your players are anything like the players that myself and Aabria play with, odds are they are going to love the random shit you made up on the spot a million times more.
The bastards.
100%. You're like just scene painting. Like you're in a tavern. There's the barkeep whose name I already know, and there's the mysterious stranger, and he's the plot hook. And here's this other stuff, and you paint one little thing of like a young sort of cabin boy is lugging a heavy chest upstairs, and they're like, "Who's that boy? Why that chest so heavy?" And then you're like, "No, please don't." And then like, I help him with the chest. "What's up, boy? You're a cabin boy? We're in a tavern on land. What cabin are you a boy of?"
Yep.
Like, God damn it. I slipped up my words, and then it's too late.
NPC pets are my favorite thing, where they're just like, "You're ours now." And you're like, "It's because I did a voice." This is why I refuse to learn voices. It's because anytime I do it, they're like, "You have to do this forever now." And I'm like, "Okay."
It's so funny that the like people like hype up the dungeon master, this like role, like I am at the head of the table. No, it is a full genie scenario. You are the servant at the table 100%. Yes, you have vast cosmic powers, but it is like the PCs can be like, "We adopt this dude. Now you do this voice forever." And you're like, "I'm damned. I'm a damned soul. I don't know what I did. Nah, this is my life." Shout out Galir. It's my NPC. Sad elven dad. Gang, an hour and a half flew by. All of the thanks in the world to our wonderful guest, Aabria Iyengar. Aabria, thank you so much for being on the show. You go and follow Aabria on Twitter and Instagram at Quiddie, Quiddie. And see her amazing shows and actual plays online. Aabria, thank you so much for being with us today.
Oh, thanks for chatting. This is so fun. I love talking shop.
Oh, love to talk shop. Thank you all at home for watching. And we'll catch you all next time on Adventuring Academy.